Why, hi there. I'm Ron Juckett, and he is Drew Douglas. And tonight is the 8th day of February, 2018. There's only 6 more days before pitchers and catchers report. We are now with you either weekly or daily through November. It's time for baseball. How are you? How are you, Drew?
I'm doing well, ready for some actual baseball. How about yourself?
Oh my goodness, this off season has gone at a pace more fitting of the old Comcast turtle family. Remember those? Remember the Slowskis or whatever the hell they were? I don't know what you have down there, but that was the case. You could either get Comcast internet, which is what we have up here, and their spokespeople were turtles called the Slowskis. And that's how this offseason has gone, like a herd of thundering turtles. And now we're finally here. And of course, the first story isn't Dave Martinez. It isn't that they've signed anybody. It's that Raudy Read was caught with horse steroids in his system. Boulder One. Yes, what an appropriate name. Your thoughts on the 80-game suspension for Raudy Read?
Yeah, I was really disappointed to hear about that because, he is the first the first guy on the Nationals 40-man roster to ever be suspended for steroids. They're one of 6 teams left, so now it's down to 5. And also, I think Severino was probably going to beat him out for that backup job, but we're finally getting to see what he can do. He debuted last year, had a pretty good year in the minors, at least offensively. So really disappointed to hear that he was using steroids and will have to miss the first 80 games this year.
Well, now we know why he was doing well in the minor leagues. Yeah. You go from someone who's never hit 10 home runs before to hit 17, I'm so disappointed. I really am. I'm with you. I'm not sure that he was going to win the job, but when you have an open audition like that, he certainly was going to get a lot of playing time. And if Pedro Severino continued not to impress, then Reed, despite his defensive maladies, really had a better chance than not. And yes, I guess they probably signed Montero knowing that the Reed news was coming. And that not only do you lose Reed for the first half of the year, if they make the playoffs, he can't play. He's not playoff eligible this year either. So a double whammy just started off, and just not what you wanted. And it wasn't. It was so blatantly obvious what he tested positive for. I'm not buying the blanket 500-word apology I read this morning in the Washington Post.
Yeah, and I don't really like that. I guess we have no way of proving that he's lying about it, but we can assume that he's lying, especially since the steroid that he did test positive for is typically used by injection. So it's not like it was in some other supplement that he was using and he didn't realize it was in it. So I'm thinking he was knowingly injecting himself with steroids, and now he's lying about it and saying that he didn't realize he was doing anything wrong.
It's not, I don't want to say it's uncommon because I don't really have anything to back it up, but there was, I can go with a Red Sox pitcher from the mid-90s by the name of Paxton Crawford, and he was just one of those guys that wasn't going to get ever out of the bullpen in AAA Pawtucket. And he knew he had to do something to get on that major league roster because the money even 20, 25 years ago was huge. Difference between AAA and the major leagues. It's $540,000 this year? Just to make a roster? That's life-changing money, even if that's all you ever do is make that minimum. It's more than what we make doing this. And so you could see where players who knew that if they were of questionable talent, why they did it. And Reed, and this is just pure speculation on my part, just was one of those, I know I had to do something to get in to change the narrative. It doesn't make it right, but I think that's where that comes from. Just the money difference. Goodness, he's 24. There's a huge difference in money between he's on the 40, so $130,000 a year and over $500,000 a year. That's just a lot. And yes, I can understand why the temptation was there.
Yeah, I understand it. I just wish he would have continued to hit well in the minors and naturally, and then just work his way and earn that backup spot and maybe eventually the starting role.
Seth says he still wants Jake Arrieta and Greg Holland. I don't think that's going to happen. As far as Reed the hitter, his power numbers kind of changed last year. If you go back to where he was in 16 and 15, he was a 240, 250 hitter, wasn't a power hitter, was all right with doubles power. But the home runs, the 17 homers that we saw last year down in Harrisburg, now you kind of have to wonder, were those chemically enhanced, or was that an actual progression in his game? And that's the other thing that happens when you have players who get caught with this stuff, is that how do you learn to trust them again?
Yeah, and I think it's going to be really hard for them to trust him again. And now if he is playing clean, I guess we'll see if he's still able to hit the way he was last year, because he was really impressive. But if it was thanks to steroids, we might see a sharp decline in his offensive abilities.
Right. I mean, especially now, if he comes back, fill me in. Is he allowed to play in the minors, or is he really gone until July?
He's allowed to participate in spring training, but then he has to sit out 80 games regardless of the level.
All right. So he won't pick up a bat again until July.
Yeah, and that's going to be tough taking that much time off.
Right, and now you got to come and build that back up. So the soonest you're going to see him in competing for a major league job again is now next spring, the spring of 2019. And so he's 24. It's not the end of his career, but what he's lost in getting caught, in my mind, outweighs any benefit he might have had.
Yeah, it's a monumental mistake, and it's certainly going to be hard to get back to what they thought of him, because I think everyone was certainly placing him above Pedro Severino, and now I think even though Severino is coming off of the down year, I think he's definitely above Reed, even if Reed was able to play, just knowing that he was using steroids.
Right. I mean, the problems with Severino are well known. The bat isn't always there. He's battled some injuries. The issue with Wieters hasn't gone away. Look, he's a guy that should not be playing more than 90 games this year in the major leagues. He's just going to tire too quickly. Are we really at the point where Miguel Montero, who, by the way, lost his backup job with the Cubs during the series last year in DC because of stolen bases, what are the chances that he breaks camp as the backup catcher? I mean, that's I suppose on paper a little bit better than Jose Lobaton, but that's not saying a heck of a lot.
Yeah, I think at this point Montero probably is the favorite, just because Severino is coming off of the down year. But I mean, maybe if Severino has a good camp and impresses the right people, he can get that job. But I mean, Montero was with the Cubs. He's familiar with Dave Martinez, and maybe that gives him an edge just by itself.
We talked a little bit about this before I hit the live button. I'm of the thought, and I think you are too, that if the Real Muto trade was going to happen, it would have happened already. Mike Rizzo, of course, being this, the ninja GM, anything is possible. But really, we both are of the school of thought that this trade, if it was going to happen, would have happened, right?
I would think so. I think if it is going to happen this offseason, he's probably just waiting for the Marlins to move down off of Robles and Soto. But I think it's probably more likely at the deadline, when maybe the Marlins are a little more desperate to trade him.
Obviously, Alex Avila went to, I believe it was Arizona.
Right.
All right. Your thoughts on possibly LeCroy at this point?
I don't know. I mean, he's coming off of a down year. Even he eventually was traded to Colorado at the trade deadline last year, and his numbers picked up. But if you look at his home road splits, he has that with what a lot of Colorado hitters have, where they're great hitters at home, and on the road they're just completely different. I think he was only hitting like 136 on the road during his time with the Rockies. It is a small sample size because it's half of his time with the Rockies, which already wasn't very, very long, but still just 136. I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't really sign Lucroy. I think he's way past his prime at this point.
Do you think that there is a surprise Rizzo move to come? We have 6 days before pitchers and catchers report.
I don't think so. I think they're already over the the luxury tax, and they're gearing up for the Bryce Harper sweepstakes next year. I think we probably see moves at the deadline instead of moves now.
That's what I thought, but you can never really tell what Rizzo's going to do. I think that would be the prudent play. I think you and I have both written about that in the last little bit. But one of the interesting things with so many players unsigned is that the union is going to hold their own training camp in Florida and Arizona. That was announced, I believe it was yesterday. And what caught me by surprise, Drew, is that Scott Boris's clients are not joining that gaggle.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure why they're doing that. I guess Boris is just kind of in his own little world, but I mean, it's good that he is a majority of the big time free agents that are remaining. So that's a lot of big names won't be down at IMG Academy in Florida with that spring training camp.
How do you think that would go for pitchers? They're obviously not going to play any games. Batters need to have live pitching in order to get their timing back. And for pitchers, like a Jake Arrieta or a Lance Lynn, they need to throw live innings. You really can't get that tempo back throwing simulated practice games, right? Or can you?
I think they could just the pitchers pitch to the remaining free agent hitters. You could get some practice in there. I read that some of the signed players actually didn't go to that camp to kind of show solidarity. Maybe they get some reps from that. I know they got a good coach leading it down in Florida with Bo Porter, a former Nationals coach. So he's been a manager in the past with Houston. He knows how to run a spring training camp. So I think it's a good idea since there are so many free agents remaining, but I would like to see these guys get signed sooner rather than later.
Seth says that Boris, to me, is the Jerry Jones of baseball. I would disagree with that because Jones is an owner, and he can dictate whatever he wants for his team. I think Boris is an extremely brilliant guy who does what is best for his clients and ultimately to himself. I mean, the more that his clients sign for him, the more he gets in commission. And for the better part of the last generation, he's been able to get what his clients have asked for. I think in this offseason, I think that as with everything else, times change. And what worked for Boris in the past doesn't necessarily work now. There hasn't been a lot of demand for hitting this time around. I mean, look what we're doing, even the pitching. Unless you're a bullpen arm, there hasn't even really been a tremendous demand for starters' arms.
Yeah, I think part of what's hurting Boris this offseason is just he represents all the top players, and they're looking for very lucrative contracts, and teams have finally wisened up, and they know those contracts typically don't work out, and they're not giving them. So I think maybe that's part of what's hurting Boris, but everyone in baseball just needs to adjust because obviously we shouldn't have this many big-name free agents remaining unsigned with less than a week until pitchers and catchers report.
But are you getting the sense from what you're reading that this is collusion?
I don't think so. I think teams are just smart now and they realize these contracts don't work out in the long run.
So what do you think? I mean, there was some actual swipes taken at each other between the union and Major League Baseball.
Yeah, I don't like that. I know obviously they're not going to strike now. They have the CBA in place for the next 3 years, but it's just a bad look for baseball. And I'd rather the MLBPA and MLB be able to get along well just to ensure there isn't a strike in the near future.
Are you concerned about teams tanking?
Yeah, I think so. I forget exactly how many teams it is, but there's a good chunk of teams who just have absolutely no intention of even trying to contend this year. And maybe some of those teams will be a surprise contender, maybe for the second wild card, but I don't think it's good for the game to have so many teams not trying to win.
Right. And we have a couple of those in the division. One of them is holding all their firepower for once that massive free agent class next year comes to the table in the Philadelphia Phillies. I mean, the Phillies tax payroll is under $100 million. I think it's like $85 million. I think they have $111 million in cap room this year. And the other one is the Miami Marlins, who's just an absolute mess. Tampa is another team that really doesn't seem to be competing. Pittsburgh has decided to have a fire sale. The whole point of having the second wild card is that really, if you're a 500 team, you have a chance to get in the playoffs and win a championship. And I'd much rather be where the Nats are, kind of the higher end of the payroll, going, look, we've done what we can to build a winner. At some point, it kind of has to pay off.
Yeah, the one thing I like about these teams tanking is just with what it's enabled Milwaukee to do, where they see there's not that many teams trying to contend, and there are a lot of playoff spots with the the second wild card, so they're really going all in. And maybe if these teams weren't tanking, we wouldn't see them going for it as much as they are. But yeah, I think it's a bad look for the game, and especially for those teams. I mean, fans aren't going to want to go out to those games as much. Obviously, the diehards will still be there for some of the games, but I don't know. I think it's better for the game if people are interested in going out, watching teams actually trying to contend.
Well, look what Houston did. I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, they were an absolute joke. They had switched leagues. They were a legitimate 110 loss team, and then they drafted well, developed well, made the playoffs, had a regression, and now they're the defending world champions.
Yeah, and the Cubs were kind of the same way, and they won in 2016. So these teams are trying to do that, but I don't like that so many of them are. So you should only do that if you're really bad, like you're losing 110 games already. Then try to kind of rebuild from there. But I don't know, these teams like Pittsburgh, I don't think they were really that bad off, and some of these teams like Tampa, they had some good talent. They traded Longoria. Supposedly they're trying to trade Archer and Colomé, Odorizzi. I don't know. I feel like maybe if you're really bad, then go for the Astros and Cubs blueprint. But these other teams, I mean, maybe they're only a piece away from contending.
In Tampa's case, this is what they've always done. I mean, it just goes to show just what a tremendous job that Joe Madden and Dave Martinez did when they ran the club, because they never were going to pay anybody. They play in a terrible ballpark, but they put no one wants to go out to St. Petersburg to watch a game. Well, the Buccaneers draw relatively well, and they play in the sun on 1 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon, and they're not a champion. They're a borderline contending team. The Tampa Bay Lightning are a contending team in the NHL. No one, people go to their games. People know when they're being BS'd. And, I think in a lot of these teams are just kind of BSing their fans. Let's see, a couple other things that set this part up. J.D. Martinez does not like the Boston Red Sox. Well, J.D. Martinez appears to like money. And if $5 and $100 million wasn't enough and no one else is really bidding against you, that's more on J.D. Martinez than it is the Boston Red Sox. You are not obligated. And the Red Sox are notorious for doing this, for bidding against themselves. If Arizona wants to get involved, great. And if that's where he ends up, fine. But people like J.D. Martinez, I don't feel like I'm being respected. Or Eric Hosmer. Eric Hosmer wants an 8-year deal. Yeah, Eric Hosmer wants an 8-year deal. What the hell has Eric Hosmer done to deserve an 8-year deal from anybody outside of Kansas City?
Yeah, he's been the face of the Royals, but I think if he leaves Kansas City, he loses a lot of his value. I'm not really that high on him as a player. I think he's great for Kansas City just because they love him so much, and obviously he's been a great leader there, but I don't think he's the same. I don't think he's worth as much if he goes to, let's say, San Diego.
And what would be the point of him going to San Diego? It's not like the Padres are going to contend.
Yeah, I'm not sure what he's thinking. I think he'll end up back with Kansas City, and I don't think he gets that 8-year deal.
I think Martinez signs with Arizona. I really think I actually voted for him for one of my top picks for MVP. He meant that much to Arizona down the stretch. The Giants are older. Colorado, you still have to start games there, and I think their bullpen will be tired. I think Arizona has a decent chance to return to the playoffs, and it seemed to work there. And it's easier, it's tough to come to the eastern markets like Boston and New York, Philadelphia, and Washington because the press. There's a lot of expectations to play. And if someone like J.D. Martinez is kind of itching to not like Boston before he signs there, God help you.
Yeah, it's kind of like the whole David Price situation in Boston.
Well, Dan Shaughnessy today, the eloquent curmudgeon that writes for the Boston Globe, said today, if it wasn't for Atlanta blowing and Pete Carroll's mind forgetting that the Patriots should have lost their last five Super Bowls. Mm-hmm. Are you kidding? I mean, only in Boston could you. And Shaughnessy, of course, took his ration of Shaughnessyism for that. Like, come on. You can understand why players don't want to come to that environment, but J.D. Martinez isn't good, or isn't pretty looking at that. Seth says this is pretty much is our year to win it all. Honestly, again, Seth, I don't think the Nats are the best team on paper in baseball. And I think they're pretty much where they are the 2 years that I've been with them. Clearly the best team in the division, capable of winning a championship. But you can't sit there and tell me that they're better right now than the Houston Astros or even the Dodgers to some degree. I'm not as high on the Yankees as other people. I think they'll be a playoff team. But the Red Sox still have Chris Sale, and they're still pretty good. But you can't sit there and tell me that the Nats are a better team on paper than the Astros and the Dodgers right now, can you?
I don't think so, but maybe that works in their favor. It seems weird. It seems like weird things happen in baseball, and being the best team doesn't always help. And the Nationals have been a 1 seed in the past and didn't get them out of the first round, so maybe that'll help a little bit.
You just never know what's going to do it, and I really do think that that the change in managerial and maybe even a higher dose of data-driven numbers is probably going to be beneficial to the team. Having said that, Jason Worth is still out there. I'm not sure what the role there would be for Jason Worth, but his intangibles are through the roof, and I guess so are his organic farming skills. Ha ha ha. Would that be someone that you would take a chance on if he was to come back even on a $2 or $3 million deal? Do you think that would be enough to do it, or do you move on at this point?
I think they do move on, but I would be interested in bringing him back just because he started off last year great, and then when he got hurt, then when he came back, he kind of struggled. I think he was just struggling to get back into the swing of things, but maybe with a clean slate to start a new year, he could go back to what he was doing. Obviously, they love him in the clubhouse. He's a great leader. That could help the transition from Dusty Baker to Dave Martinez. So, I would take him back in a backup role if he's willing to fill that role.
No national writer hates any team. That's one of the biggest misconceptions out there, whether you're a broadcaster or a writer, is why does Joe Buck hate my team? Joe Buck doesn't hate your team. Joe Buck is supposed to be impartial. There are players. We all have favorite players. And I'm sorry, what Madison Bumgarner did in the 2015 World Series was worthy of the praise he got on that particular night. But I've never been of the school of thought that particular writers or particular broadcasters hate other teams. Mary Chass hates everyone under the age of 60. That's pretty obvious. You've talked with Tom Boswell. I don't think Mr. Boswell and Bryce Harper are on each other's Christmas card lists. But I don't think but as far as hate, I don't think it doesn't make any sense to hate other teams. Teams that I can tell you who I rooted for as a kid, but I would certainly hope for that if the Yankees did something positive, I could sit there and go, that's a pretty good move. Speaking of Yankees moves, what the hell is Russell Wilson going to do with them?
I think it was just he wanted to play for the Yankees. He said that him and his dad always told him that he wanted to see him in the Yankee uniform. So, he wasn't going to do anything in Texas. He was traded for future considerations. I can't imagine the Rangers are going to get too much for him, but he'll go in, mess around a little bit in spring training.
I believe if it's not a player to be named later, and it won't that look good on the back of someone's baseball card if they do actually make the majors, I'm sure it'll be for the infamous Mr. Cash in his considerable six-figure considerations. Seth asks, are the Nationals done making moves? I would never say never, and we missed you 2 weeks ago when the Brewers made all those moves as we were coming on the air. But I would really be surprised. I think when Rizzo made I was surprised that go back to this that Mike Rizzo actually announced that AJ Cole was going to be the fifth starter. I really think that kind of slammed a lot of doors as far as what they were going to do pitching wise at that point, because I don't think that Rizzo would say, oh, sure, we're going to do this. And then the next, 48 hours later, the press conference is for Jake Arrieta. And I don't think he would have said that if he thought that was going to happen. But on the other hand, this is the same team that signed Matt Wieters after camp started last year. You just never know. we both agreed that it's going to be July before they do anything substantial. But you just don't know what they're going to do. If it's going to be kind of bringing someone back, I guess, kind of in like the Howie Kendrick mold or something like that. You could maybe Joe Blanton or something like that. I just don't see a major move between now and next Wednesday. Do you?
No, I think if they make any moves at all, it'll just be bringing guys in on minor league deals with invite to big league spring training. Maybe they compete for, say, the backup catcher role or spot off the bench, maybe a spot in the bullpen, or even just minor league depth in case somebody gets hurt. I don't think we see any big moves from the Nets.
Seth brings up the point, and we should have mentioned this on the website, but Davey Lopes retired. Now, Davey Lopes played when I was a baby. Okay, Davey Lopes is a baseball lifer. He was a great second baseman for the Los Angeles Dodgers back in the 70s. He and Dusty Baker were teammates. The 1977 Los Angeles Dodgers infield all hit over 20 home runs apiece. I'm not sure how the hell Bill Russell hit 20 homers at short, but I guess he did. It was Ron Say at third, Bill Russell at short. And look, I'm not even cheating, okay? This is all off my ancient memory. Davey Lopes at second and Steve Garvey, who we all thought was a Hall of Famer, at first. And they went back-to-back National League championships. They fell to the Yankees in 77 and 78. Lopes went on to play for 1,000 different teams, was an outfielder for a while, and then was a coach. He was a coach and a manager. Coached in Philadelphia, coached in Los Angeles, coached, of course, in Washington, was the first base coach. Just a baseball lifer, and he's 70, 71 years old, and he says, I'm ready to do something new. And so really he did everything but catch and pitch, I think, over the course of his career. Just a really remarkable baseball personality.
Yeah, and I think he was a great first base coach with the Nationals. I think just the fact that Trey Turner stole, 46 bags, even though he missed 2 months. I think obviously Trey Turner is an excellent base stealer, and he's one of the fastest guys in the league, but I know he gives a lot of credit to Davey Lopes, and a lot of players say that Davey Lopes is the best first base coach in the league, if not just the best coach overall in the league. So I'm sure the Nationals will miss him. They have Tim Bogart coming in. I've heard a lot of good things about him, but I mean, Davey Lopes is kind of in a league of his own, at least as a first base coach. And I mean, the Nationals have some good base stealers, but I think we definitely see some regression in the base stealing category.
But at third base, it's Bob Henley. 5 managers from now, Bob Henley will still be at third base.
Yeah, I'm not sure how he's made it through all these managerial changes.
He's younger than I am. I'm 46. He's like 44, 45 years old. And so he's got a lot of coaching left with him. Most of this coaching staff, and we'll hear a lot more Derek Lilliquist's name in the next little while, because he's the one that's first up with pitchers and catchers reporting. They're all in that late 40s, early 50s. They've been in baseball for baseball lifers. They all have, except for Henley, managerial and now Martinez, managerial experience, multiple levels of coaching in the majors and the minors, and they're all very hungry. They all have something to prove. There's a lot of future managers coaching this team right now. You mentioned Tim Bogart. I'm not sure about Lilliquist. Dave Martinez waited forever for this chance. It's just going to be very interesting to see how they approach the game. And it's going to be a generational difference, because a lot of Davey Lopes' coaches, except for Henley, were in that 65 to 70 range. Chris Spire wasn't a spring chicken. Jacques Jones pretty much bunted himself out of trouble with his escapades down in San Diego. Rick Shue is a pretty young guy as a coach is concerned. It'll be very interesting to see if there are any immediate changes in how the Nats do business. I did some predictions on Dave Martinez. I think, we'll see the pitcher batting eighth. What are you most excited to see from this new core of coaches?
I guess I'm excited to see, especially how the pitching works out. Mike Maddox is one of the best pitching coaches in the league. And obviously, the Nationals essentially traded pitching coaches with St. Louis, as Maddox went to the Cardinals and Lilliquist came from St. Louis to D.C. He really preaches ground balls, so I want to see how that works out, especially Since Wieters tends to like the high fastball, maybe we'll see if his game changing or his game calling changes a little bit. And like I was talking about earlier, how aggressive they're on the bases. Obviously, Henley's very aggressive at third, but without Lopes at first, their base stealing might not be quite as good this year. So, yeah, I guess with a new coaching staff, it remains to be seen what their style will be, especially with Martinez, since he is a rookie manager. So, it should be a very exciting year for the Nationals.
It should be a very exciting year. Mets have made some moves. People have asked why we are so bullish on the Nats winning by double digits. I've not seen the Mets do anything. I mean, yes, they signed Todd Frazier, who is a all-star person, from what I understand, a decent defending third baseman, but he's going to strike out 175 times. He's going to, and I haven't seen anything out of the Mets, even if, let's say, that their starting pitchers are healthy, that says the Mets can contend. I mean, they're a very one-dimensional offensive club. They're going to hit a lot of homers. They're going to hit a lot of solo homers. And if you expect that the pitching staff is going to get healthy all of a sudden, that doesn't happen. You know, once you start to lose that reputation for having endurance, you're not getting that back. Do you see the Mets as any real threat to the Nats right now?
I think if everything goes right for the Mets, they're a 500 team, and I don't even think everything will go right. So, I mean, I think people have kind of been saying, the Mets have made some improvements. The Nationals aren't guaranteed to win the division. Obviously, nothing's guaranteed, but I think the Nationals still will win the division by a wide margin. Maybe not 20 games, but it shouldn't be much of a race down the stretch.
Fangraphs had them as a one-game favorite over the Mets going into last year, and I thought that was a reasonable expectation. The Mets, on paper, were a good team. Fangraphs has them as a 10-game favorite over the Mets now. I think the margin will be closer to 20. I just don't see anyone really in the division, unless Philadelphia goes out and signs some people, that they're even going to make it close. That might benefit the Mets for a while, but especially if they continue to have pitching problems, they aren't going anywhere, and their bullpen isn't all that great. So Seth says he thinks the Mets are going to be sellers at the deadline. I don't think the Mets know what they're going to do. I think they kind of have to get out there and give it some effort, because they never want to cede any ground to the Yankees. And let's face it, the Yankees are a very good ball club this year. And you can't say, especially after you brought Sandy Alderson back and changed around the coaching staff, that you can't say right now in February of 2018, oh yeah, our focus is 2019. It doesn't sell you a lot of tickets. And the Mets need to sell some tickets. So, but I'm with Seth. The people that they've signed a reasonable deals. I'm surprised they got Jay Bruce back, because that was not a very amicable parting between Bruce and the Mets. But money talks, and so we'll see. But no, I just don't see the division being tough at all.
No, I don't. I think their main competition is probably Philadelphia, and they're probably at least a year away from being a serious contender.
I think, Philly has the resources to do some damage financially, and they have a pretty good minor league system. I think the Braves will regress a little bit this year. I'd be curious to see what happens with Dansby Swanson, but really it's Freddie Freeman and the 24 dwarves around him right now. Delighted to see that the Rangers took a chance on Bartolo Colon, the oldest player left in the majors. He's 44, big sexy.
Yeah, he's good for the game.
Yeah, he's great for the game. Still hit maybe one of the biggest home runs in Major League history. And the fact that he did it in San Diego, and that giant ballpark. I'm sure that many of you are not fans of Gary, Ron, and Keith on SNY in New York, but the call of Gary Cohen's call of Colon's home run is just absolutely priceless. Because there is such genuine shock and joy at the moment. It's worth looking up here on YouTube. Nats and Yanks will be a fun series this year. Nats and Red Sox, of course, play on the 4th of July. Looking forward to that. 11 o'clock in the morning. That's my wife's 45th birthday. Oh, my wife's birthday. I didn't say that, did I? I'm going to get in trouble. But that's fine. 11 o'clock in the morning. All right. I think that pretty much goes through what. Did you have anything else that you want to talk about? We talked about the free agent camps and whether there'd be any moves and all that. I think we got everything since we were over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, it just about covers it. Hopefully we'll hear some actual news now that pitchers and catchers are reporting soon.
So we will be with you at this time at least every Thursday until we get into some games. And you know what? I didn't see, we talked about the TV schedule came out the last time we talked. And what's not listed right now, Drew, is the Twins game. It'll be a TV game, but it's not listed right now as being one. So we will be with you at least every Thursday during the exhibition season, and along with the two primetime television games that will be on Masson. Will be actual post-game DoDCast. I think one is a 6 o'clock game against Houston, and the other one's against the Mets. Doesn't really matter, but we'll be with you twice during the preseason. And along with now, we'll be with you at least every Thursday the rest of the way until the Nat season is done. We turned the corner, guys. It's coming. It's coming. Can you hear it?
It's about time.
It's about time. It's Angel Hernandez throwing out Asdrubal Cabrera. So by the time that as Cabrera goes past the right field in the 20 minutes, it'll be time for baseball. All right. So please read our stuff on the website at districtondeck.com. Brian Foley, Ron Scheinberg, and Blake Finney have contributed some wonderful stuff recently, and we would love you to read their stuff. Blake did a piece on Seth Romero. Brian has a piece tomorrow, which I forget what it was, but it was very good. And of course, we have pieces that go up every morning at 8 and noon. Follow us on Twitter at District on Deck. We will be much more active than that now that the season's around again. I had fun during the Super Bowl. Drew had no idea that was coming on, and I kept waiting for him to say something.
It looked like you were having fun. I'll let you be.
My football analysis skills aren't very good. We'll just leave it at that. But we did have fun during the Super Bowl. And of course, give us a like and follow on Facebook at District on Deck. And so for Drew Douglas and the rest of the gang at District on Deck, I'm Ron Checkett. We will talk to you next Thursday night at 9 o'clock. Until then, let me go over here. We'll talk to you the next time. Good night.